leg. So, a good look right, a good look ahead, a good look left and behind, and a left level turn, 30 degrees of bank. Note the position of the horizon in the windscreen. Onto our base leg heading. And there we are, just completing the turn now, bringing the wings gently level, checking that the heading we've chosen is a good one. Selecting carburetor heat hot, reducing the power to our descent power, and selecting 2/3 of flap as the airspeed decays to 80 knots. Note the new attitude. This is the 80 knot attitude with 2/3 of flap and the power set. Note the new position of the horizon in the windscreen. As I look to the right, check that we are clear on final approach, no one joining on an extended final. Looking now towards the runway. And I now commence the left-hand turn onto final approach, checking runway, airspeed, runway, airspeed, runway, airspeed. And as I complete the turn, 3 things to check: heading, perspective, and speed. Final score.
We've now turned on to final approach, and this is the picture we want to see. The heading is good, we're lined up with the runway centerline. The perspective is good, the numbers remaining fixed in that position. And most importantly, the speed is good. Heading, perspective, and speed. Now, if we're too high, that's the picture we'll see. It will be as if we're looking down on top of the runway. The numbers will be low in the windscreen, possibly even obscured by the spinner. Too high an approach. If we're too low, this is the picture we'll see. Numbers sitting high in the windscreen, a much plainer perspective. It will almost be as if we're driving down the runway rather than flying above it. Too high, reduce the power, lower the nose attitude to maintain the speed. Too low, increase the power, raise the nose attitude to maintain the speed. But throughout all the approaches, checking heading, perspective, and speed.
Golf Delta Yankee, finals, full stop, 04.
Golf Delta Yankees, clear to land 04, the wind 050 degrees 18 knots.
Delta Yankee, clear to land 04. All right, so, final approach established, the speed is good. Selecting full flap now for the landing, and continuing to check our 3 requirements. Is the heading correct? Yes, it is, in line with the runway. Is the perspective good? Yes, it is. Is the airspeed correct? Yes, the airspeed is correct. So continually thinking heading, perspective, speed. And if you look through the windscreen, you'll see the numbers remaining fixed in that position. We have a displaced threshold here at Cranfield, so we'll be landing beyond those 2 arrows. Heading good, perspective good, and airspeed good. All right, just going a little bit fast now, so just selecting a slightly higher nose attitude and reducing the power to maintain the rate of descent. Heading's good, perspective, and airspeed. Heading, perspective, and airspeed. As we come closer to the runway, now comes the important part, the landing.
And now we come to probably the most demanding part of the course, the landing. Here you can see the aircraft on the final stages of its final approach. This is the picture as seen by the pilot from the cockpit. Approximately the height of a double-decker bus, the pilot brings the aircraft towards a level flight attitude, slowly but completely closing the throttle, keeping the aircraft flying just 1 foot above the runway centerline, keeping it flying, keeping it flying, keeping it flying, moving into the landing attitude. The main wheels touch, followed gently by the nose wheel, gentle braking and bringing the aircraft to a stop. It sounds simple, but a lot of practice will be needed.
As we come closer to the runway, now comes the important part, the landing. I'm going to bring the aircraft to a position where it's flying level with the runway surface, approximately 1 foot above, as I now slowly but completely close the throttle, keeping the aircraft flying, 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 keeping her flying, 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 and down. Main wheels first, followed by the nose wheel. There we go. So let's examine now, when we're too high or too low on the approach, the views that we see. So So this is what it's like when we're too low. Notice the threshold is sitting high in the windscreen. The nose is a long way below the threshold, indicating that we are too low. Now what I'm going to do is to maintain height, and we will slowly, progressively reapproach the ideal glide slope. Note the new perspective of the runway as we become higher relative to that ideal glide slope. Taking on a much more planned perspective as the runway threshold works its way down the windscreen towards the spinner. Try and work out for yourself where you think the correct position is, and I will tell you. Not quite. Just about there. And there we have it, the correct or ideal 3-degree approach path that we're aiming to maintain. However, I'm going to maintain height still, and you'll notice we're now becoming high on the approach. The threshold and the numbers, if you can see them, are working their way down to the bottom of the windscreen and are shortly to become obscured by the spinner. And in this position, we are too high and obviously wouldn't be able to make it. If we were to close the power, there wouldn't be sufficient room for us to land on the runway available. Let me just lower the nose so you can see the runway clearly and see how high we are relative to it. So nothing else to do except to go around.
Following a period of practicing circuits and landings, the student is sent on their first solo. This is a unique moment, never to be forgotten, as this student recalls.
Well, they were good, Jim. No problems there.
Thank you.
Happy to go on your own now?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. No problems?
No.
Fine.
I'll never forget my first solo. They say there are a few things in life that you can't repeat, and this has got to be one of them. For the first time in my life, I felt entirely alone. At the end of the last circuit, my instructor turned to me and said, "Okay, it's time for one on your own." I'll always remember the experience. I think I sang halfway around the circuit. It seemed to last so much longer than the previous ones. In a strange way, my instructor was still sitting beside me, but he wasn't. It all went like clockwork. By the time it came to the final approach, I knew I'd hacked it. Speed good, approach angle good. The flare in the landing, though I say it myself, was one of the best I'd ever done. No, I'll never forget that moment.
How was it?
Marvellous.
Excellent. It was a good landing.
Before you go solo, you will also have dealt with various simulated emergencies, including forced landings, cockpit fires, electrical failure, and engine failures after takeoff. You will have also looked at the stall. So, let's now look at the clean stall and its recovery. Now, flying isn't only about getting from A to B as quickly as possible. Sometimes we have to fly slowly. So it's important that we appreciate the problems of slow flight and the stall. Now, prior to this exercise, we will carry out what we call the Hazel checks. Do we have sufficient height for the exercise? Is the airframe in the correct configuration? Are we secure in our seats, no loose articles? Is the engine in a happy condition, all gauges in the green? Are we in the correct location? And have we carried out a thorough lookout, in particular beneath the aircraft? Assuming we have done those checks and we're happy with them, we go for slow flight. We close the throttle, and as the airspeed reduces, we find we have to select a higher and higher nose attitude in order to maintain